What is up, Chad McGears? This is gonna have to be a short episode because I got work in like 30 minutes. But it's a rainy Sunday, so I thought, we might as well make a video because why not? So today I'm gonna be talking about Denmark because I love Denmark. So, and it's probably gonna be a two-part video because this is a really long PowerPoint. It's not actually about Denmark. Um, so yeah, Denmark. I love Denmark. Denmark's amazing. It's fantastic, fantastical, beautiful, great place. Now let's look at what Denmark is now. So here's Denmark, and there's more Denmark. We got northern Denmark and northeastern Denmark, which are sometimes called Sweden and Norway, but they're actually just different parts of Denmark. Um, but what's really interesting is Denmark before. So Denmark used to own all of these things, just because they might still. I don't really know. And they owned Estonia. Is that Estonia? Yeah, that's Estonia. I didn't know that. They own that little bit. Oh, that's the Faroe Islands. Iceland, Greenland. This big old Phineas head. They own that, and then this big old chunk in the Mediterranean. Now that's the important part. Gotta get the arrow in there. So let's let's zoom in on that important part. Whoa. So this is Phoenicia. Now, more importantly, it's the Phoenician expansion. But before we get into the Phoenician expansion, we got to talk about Phoenicia itself, which are just the important bits like Tyre, Sidon, and I forgot what the other third big city was. I think it's Byblos, but I'm not sure. It's been a while since I looked at this Google Slides. Yeah, this is Phoenicia. I already said that, but the Google Slides wants to say it. So let's talk about Phoenicia and why they're important. So basically, when the Bronze Age was happening, they were just like this tiny little speck of dust. They were just three cities that were just chilling out, and they were in this nice sheltered area of Israel that was surrounded by a big old forest on like some mountains. So no one was gonna touch them because they had no clue that they were there. They were just like, we're chilling. And then the Bronze Age collapse happened, and everyone got like completely destroyed and demolished by like famine, sea people, some other stuff. I don't know. You can look up Bronze Age collapse and be like mystified. And be like, whoa, no way. But you want to know who didn't get destroyed aside from Egypt? Um, the Phoenicians, because no one knew where they were. So when everyone was like super weak and like couldn't do anything, they were like, "It's big brain time. It's time to do stuff. It's time to do things." And they were like, "Let's make boats." So that takes us to power. The next slide. So most people are like, "Oh man, I'm gonna make a really cool like horse army with a bunch of horse archers. We're gonna do cool horsey stuff." Not the Phoenicians. They were like, "Nah, we are gonna make boats, and then with those boats, guess what we're gonna do? We're gonna sail. We're gonna sail with the boats because that's what boats are used for. And when we're sailing, we're gonna make a bunch of trade." And it's like, wow, that's deep stuff. It's good that they did that because like people weren't doing that at the time, or maybe they were. Honestly, they probably were. I don't know. I wasn't really there. This is all based on like this one guy that I heard. He was on the street and he just like told me the story of Phoenicia, and I memorized every single word he said, and that's what I'm repeating to you guys right now. That's my source, Random Street Man. All right, so they make a bunch of boats. They start trading. They start building their empire. They start getting big, and then guess what happens in the Iron Age? They are still doing the same thing. But now we get to look at a little bit of their expansion. So I was wrong when I said it was Byblos. It was not. The three main cities from the beginning were Tyre, Sidon, and Tripoli. I'm pretty sure. Don't quote me on this. Don't quote me on this. But I'm pretty sure. Because like I said, like this is man on the street source. I don't know if like he just said he was there. So I'm assuming that he's right. Because like you wouldn't lie about that. But in the off chance that he did. So they started just expanding. They were like, oh, now we're gonna own more of this little bit. Because originally it was just 3 cities, and now there are more than 3 cities. Yeah, map update. Oh, sorry, I have not seen this thing in a really long time. So I guess they started taking Sardinia, and they were like, yeah, that's ours now. We own that. And then they're like, you know what, Malta, yeah, thank you very much. And Cyprus, yeah, sure, we'll put a little stuff on that. I think this was like before the map update, and then this is after the map update. There's like no rhyme and reason to this slideshow. I hope you know that. Your guess is as good as mine. And then they were like, oh, the Balearic Islands, sure, wherever that is, and then Sicily and North Africa, because North Africa is important. And they were just expanding in the Iron Age. They were like, you know what, let's do it. Let's expand. Now, oh, right. I'm supposed to talk about why they expanded. So the reason they expanded is because there were the Assyrians, and they were just like killing everybody. They were like, you know what, our land, we're gonna take this too, and they just kept taking land. They were just killing everyone, and then they got to the Phoenicians, and they were like, give us your land, man, we want it. But then they were like, wait a minute, these guys are actually kind of cool and important and rich, and they're really useful. So if we just kill them, I think that we're not going to get the use out of them that we could. So instead, let's sign a contract that they were like kind of forced to sign, because it's either you sign the contract or you die. So not much of a choice there. But basically, they were like, okay, we get to use your boats whenever we're in need, and you make us a bunch of metal. And they were like, all right, we'll make you a bunch of metal. But the thing is, they didn't have the foundries to make the metal quota that was asked by the Assyrians. So they're like, shoot, man, we got to expand. We got to expand to some iron-rich areas. Now, those mainly where those iron-rich areas were was like northern Africa. I'm pretty sure. Don't quote me on that. And so they went to northern Africa, and they were like, yeah, let's set up some some Hacksilver foundries. I'm pretty sure it was Hacksilver. And you may be like, oh, how do you know this? How do you know what time frame this was? And if you put your attention to this graph that looks to be in Hebrew or some language that I can't understand and has 2 lines on it, you will, clearly see that we're looking at the carbon dating. So basically what happened is they saw this Hacksilver that had been sunken from boats. Maybe there was a storm or something. I don't know. They found these boats with a bunch of Hacksilver in the ocean, and they were engraved with like Phoenicia, like made in Phoenicia. It was like the made in China, but the 1000 BC, And so they did some, I think it was carbon dating. I'm not really sure. They did something, and they were like, "Whoa, this is from this long ago. This is pretty old, and it's off the coast of so and so area," and that's how they know. And you might be like, "How do I know all of this?" It's because of the man on the street. He just told me. He was just a prophet, man. Like he was a cool guy. Wish I remembered his name. All right, so now we get to talk about Hiram the First. I'm probably gonna pronounce all these names wrong. It's fine. So in 980 BC, he was ruling over Tyre, and so we're actually going back in time. I'm pretty sure. Like this, yeah, I'm pretty sure we're going back in time. And so he became a king at 19, and like now that sounds kind of crazy. At the time, not really so crazy. There were like 14-year-old kings, or like 2-year-old kings. Like people just became kings just at really young ages for whatever reason. But this guy became king at like a reasonable age, in my opinion. Like that seems reasonably reasonable for the time. 19, like you're an adult. You can legally have sex. I feel like that's fair. Um, And so at the time, Sidon was like this huge. It was the big city. It was like big old city. It was nice and huge. And Haram was like, "Nah, we're gonna make Tyre big." So he was like, "I'm gonna do exactly that." And he suppressed the Eutychian rebellion, I guess. I don't know what that is, but he did it. He suppressed it. And then he allied with King David of the United Kingdom of Israel. Now, you might be like, oh, who's David? And we'll get to that. We'll get to that in a little bit. And then David died, which was pretty sad. So then he allied with David's son. And they were like, they were tight. They were like, yo, get me this. And he was like, all right, bet. But you get me this. And they were like, oh, we're going to do this. So he had a bunch of trade routes with David's son. And it was like, wow, that's cool. And that was all he did. So instead, we're going to be talking about David, because David's cool. Oh, I don't know what that's from. I love King David, though. Yes, I do love King David. All right, so David was the king of Israel. I don't think that's right. He was one of the kings of Israel. I'm pretty sure. I think there were multiple. But anyways, David and Goliath. This is that David. Yeah. So I'm just gonna retell the David and Goliath story in case you don't know about it. So there was this King Saul, and he was like, "Yo, there's this Goliath. I want someone to kill him. He's really big, and I don't like him. He's just big, you know." Which honestly kind of fucked up on Saul's part. Like the guy's just big. What's wrong with that? But he was like, you know what? Whoever kills him gets a bunch of money, and they get to marry my oldest daughter, Merab. And David was like, okay, awesome. Sure, I'd love to marry. No. He was like, awesome, I'd love some money. So he goes and kills Goliath. And then when Saul is offering the money and his oldest daughter, which I feel like, not cool, Saul. But, like, not, I don't know. When he's doing that, David's like, you know what, I don't want to marry your daughter. I'm sorry. So he swerved Merab, and it was like, damn. Damn. Think about that. Let that sink in. It's there waiting at your door. Let it in. Okay, now that the sink is in, let's look at what Merab would look like today. Here's an accurate depiction of Merab. As you can tell, he swerved Merab. Yeah, he did a lot of other shit too, but I didn't want to read that much. But he swerved Merab. That's wild. That's wild. So now let's talk about Phoenicia again. After that like little sidetrack. So right now they're on top. Like this is peak Phoenicia. Not peak, it's up there. So they got 80 million power. They're going crazy. So let's just don't look at that. So right about here, this is Bronze Age. This is Bronze Age. At Bronze Age collapse. That is Iron Age, I think. I'm gonna be honest. I don't know any of these time frames. But they're just going up. That's all that matters. As you can tell, it's measured in gigashit units, and it's going crazy. They're at like 80 million. Yeah, so it's this graph is not to scale. I don't know why I thought I was gonna like read when it got to 80 million. It's not. This is not a to scale graph. Okay, never mind. But yeah, they're going crazy. So now let's look at the late Iron Age. So Phoenicia, they're sea traders, and that makes them rich. But we gotta wonder, what do they trade? We already know that like they have a lot of iron foundries, so probably iron, if I were to guess. Let's look at else. So let's look at their fat money makers. They got purple dye. And you might be like, oh wow, how did they make this purple dye? Well, let me tell you. So there were these snails, and they released this ink. It was marooned purple. And what they would do is they would just get these snails, and then they'd like scare them, so they release their ink, and then they'd just like get a bunch of them and make a bunch of dye. And at the time, no one could make purple dye, so they just had like a monopoly on it. But because the purple dye was so hard to make, it was only sought out by really rich people. They were like, oh, I want to show how wealthy I am by wearing purple. And it was known as royal purple. Look at that. Look at that royal purple right there. And so they also made metal. As I said before, when the Assyrians went and took over, they were like, okay, you need to make us a bunch of metal. And they were like, oh, man, let me expand and go make metal. So they also made a bunch of metal. And then they were like, okay, well, if we're already making purple dye, we should make fancy robes too, so that people have the whole like Phoenician package, you know. So they made robes as well, And you might be like, wow, this is looking really similar. And that's because Clash of Clans copied the Phoenician Empire. And they haven't been sued yet, which is kind of crazy. So there's some other things that Phoenicia did. So they, I don't know, made the alphabet, but that's not really that important. They had sick ass boats that were made of strong wood, and everyone was like, dude, how did you make these boats? They're so cool. And they were like, okay, well, we made the boats with really strong wood. And they were like, oh, I think it was Lebanese wood, if I remember correctly from Strange Man. But don't quote me on that. Don't quote me on that. And so the North Star, I'm not going to say they discovered it because I'm sure that other people like had discovered it long before that, but they sailed with it. And no one in the Mediterranean at the time really used stars for like sea finding. Yeah. Um, but the Greeks, oh my God, the Greeks were like meat riding so hard on the Phoenicians. They were like, no way, man. Like, here's the Greeks right now: Greece, Phoenicia. They were like, they called the North Star the Phoenician Star. And they were like, whoa, that's why. Like, every single thing that Phoenicia did, they were like, that's so cool. Let's name it the Phoenician this, the Phoenician that. And it was just like, Jesus. And they considered themselves rivals of Phoenicia, but it's like, name one good thing Greek did. You can't. I know I didn't give you enough time. That's on purpose. You can't name anything they did. I'm, yeah. So they would just compliment them every single chance they got. They were just like, "Oh, I love Phoenicia." Yeah, I'm not a big Greek fan. Okay, so now let's talk. Actually, what time is it? Oh, I gotta go to work. You will see about Carthage in part 2. Farewell.